Elena Martinez stood on the cold concrete steps of the county courthouse, clutching her worn leather purse with both hands. The October wind whipped through her dark hair as she watched strangers examine her father's old farming equipment like vultures picking at bones. Everything she had ever known was about to be sold to pay off debts she never knew existed. Next item up for auction, the auctioneer called out in his nasal voice. We have the remaining assets to settle the Martinez family debt. Anyone interested in taking on the work contract can step forward now. Elena's stomach dropped. This was it. The moment she had been dreading for weeks. When her father died suddenly of a heart attack 3 months ago, she discovered their small cattle ranch was drowning in debt. The bank had already taken the land. Now, under an old territorial law that somehow still existed, she could work off the remaining debt through contracted labor. She looked around at the crowd gathered for the auction. Most were local ranchers and farmers looking for cheap equipment. But some faces made her skin crawl. Men with calculating eyes who looked at her like she was just another piece of property to be bought and used. I'll take the equipment lot for $2,000, called out Frank Peterson, a man known for his wandering hands and bad temper. Elena's heart raced. She knew what working for him would mean. I'll go $3,000, said another voice. This came from Bill Harris, who was even worse than Peterson. Elena felt sick. $4,000. The voice was so deep it seemed to rumble, from the ground itself. Elena turned to see where it came from and her breath caught. Standing at the back of the crowd was the tallest man she had ever seen. He had to be almost 7 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked the sun. His face was weathered like old leather, and his hands looked like they could crush rocks. Everyone called him Giant Jake Morrison. Elena had heard stories about him her whole life. He owned the biggest ranch in 3 counties and kept to himself, mostly. People said he was mean as a rattlesnake and twice as dangerous. Looking at him now, Elena could believe it. $5,000, Peterson called out, not wanting to give up. $10,000, Giant Jake said without hesitation. His voice was calm but carried a warning that made Peterson step back. The auctioneer looked around. Any other bids? Going once, going twice. Sold to Jake Morrison for $10,000. Elena felt her knees go weak. She was about to work for the most feared man in the county. As the crowd began to break up, she watched Giant Jake walk toward her. Each step he took made her want to run, but she forced herself to stay put. She had nowhere else to go anyway. When he finally reached her, she had to crane her neck back to look at his face. His eyes were pale blue, like winter sky, and they studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. You're Elena Martinez, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir, she managed to say, surprised her voice worked at all. I knew your father. Carlos was a good man. His voice was gentler than she expected, but still made her feel small. Thank you, she whispered. Giant Jake pulled out a thick envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to the auctioneer, who quickly counted the money. Then he signed some papers that Elena couldn't see clearly. When everything was done, the auctioneer walked away, leaving them alone on the courthouse steps. You're mine now, Giant Jake said, looking down at her with those pale eyes. The words hit Elena like a slap. All the fear and anger she had been holding back for months suddenly exploded inside her. She straightened her shoulders and lifted, her chin looking directly into his face even though it made her neck hurt. I may owe you money, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. But I am not yours. I am not anyone's. And I never will be. Something flickered across Giant Jake's face, surprise maybe. Or respect. Elena couldn't tell which. That's not what I meant, he said quietly. Then you should choose your words more carefully, Elena shot back. She was scared out of her mind, but she would not let this giant of a man think. He could intimidate her into submission. Giant Jake stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her complete shock, the corner of his mouth twitched up in what might have been the beginning of a smile. I can see you've got your father's fire, he said. That's good. You're going to need it. He turned and started walking toward an enormous black pickup truck parked across the street. Elena hurried to keep up with his long strides. her small suitcase bumping against her leg. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home," he said simply. "Your new home, anyway." As they reached the truck, Giant Jake opened the passenger door for her. The cab was so high off the ground that Elena needed the running board to climb in. Everything about the truck was oversized, just like its owner. The steering wheel looked tiny in Giant Jake's massive hands. They drove in silence through the rolling hills outside town. Elena stared out the window at the familiar landscape, wondering if she would ever see it as a free woman again. The debt she owed was enormous. It would take years to work it off, assuming Giant Jake was fair about wages, and she had no reason to believe he would be. "What kind of work will I be doing?" she finally asked. "Ranch work," he said without taking his eyes off the road. "Cooking, cleaning, bookkeeping, maybe help with the cattle if you're able." Elena nodded. She had grown up on a ranch, so at least the work wouldn't be completely foreign to her. But working for someone else, especially someone who owned her debt, would be different than working her own family's land. "What are the rules?" she asked. Giant Jake glanced at her. "Rules? About my living situation? My arrangements." Elena felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she had to know what he expected from her. Giant Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "There are no arrangements," he said firmly. "You work, I pay down your debt, that's it." Elena studied his profile, trying to read his expression. "And if I want to leave?" "Can't stop you," he said. "But the debt follows you wherever you go. Bank will just sell it to someone else, probably someone worse than me." Elena knew he was right. At least Giant Jake seemed to be straightforward about what he wanted, and he hadn't tried to touch her or make any inappropriate comments like Peterson or Harris would have. As they crested a hill, Elena saw Morrison Ranch spread out before them. It was enormous, with white fences stretching as far as the eye could see. The main house was a large 2-story building with a wraparound porch. Several barns and outbuildings dotted the property, and hundreds of cattle grazed in the pastures. "It's beautiful," Elena said without thinking. "It's home," Giant Jake replied. He drove past the main house to a smaller building about 100 yards away. It was a neat little cottage with its own porch and a garden that someone had been tending carefully. "This is where you'll stay," Giant Jake said as he parked the truck. Elena stared at the cottage in surprise. "I thought I'd be staying in a bunkhouse or something." "Bunkhouse is for the men," Giant Jake said. "Wouldn't be proper." He got out of the truck and came around to open her door. Elena climbed down, still amazed that she would have her own place to live. It was more than she had dared to hope for. Giant Jake carried her suitcase to the front door and produced a key from his pocket. "It's furnished," he said as he opened the door. "Basic stuff, but it should do." Elena stepped inside and looked around. The cottage was small but clean and comfortable. There was a living room with a fireplace, a tiny kitchen, and she could see a bedroom and bathroom down a short hallway. Someone had even put fresh flowers on the kitchen table. "Mrs. Henderson from town comes by once a week to clean and stock groceries," Giant Jake explained. "She'll teach you the ranch routine tomorrow. Workday starts at 6. Elena turned to face him. "Mr. Morrison, I want you to know that I intend to work hard and pay off this debt as quickly as possible. I won't cause you any trouble." Giant Jake studied her face for a moment. "I believe you," he said. "But Elena?" "Yes?" "Call me Jake. Mr. Morrison was my father, and he's been dead a long time." With that, he handed her the key and walked back to his truck. Elena watched from her doorway as he drove away, leaving her alone with her thoughts and fears about what her new life would bring. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, Elena unpacked her few belongings and tried to make sense of her situation. She was essentially an indentured servant to a man who could probably break her in half without trying. But he had given her privacy, dignity, and what seemed like fair treatment so far. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be as bad as she had feared. But as she settled into her new bed that night, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn down a path she never could have imagined. Elena woke up to the sound of roosters crowing and immediately panicked. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, painted white instead of the faded blue of her childhood bedroom. Then reality crashed back. She wasn't at her father's ranch anymore. She was at Morrison Ranch, owned by the giant of a man who had bought her debt yesterday. She quickly dressed in jeans and a work shirt, braided her long dark hair back, and stepped outside just as the sun was painting the mountains pink and gold. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of hay and cattle. Despite her circumstances, Elena couldn't help but admire the beauty of the place. "You must be Elena." A cheerful voice made her turn around. A plump woman with gray hair and kind eyes was walking up the path carrying a basket. "I'm Betty Henderson. Jake asked me to show you around today." Elena smiled, grateful for a friendly face. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Henderson." "Oh, call me Betty, dear, everyone does." Betty's eyes sparkled with warmth. "I've been helping Jake run this place for years. He's a good man, that one, even if he looks scary as a bear." They walked toward the main house together, Betty chattering about the ranch operations. "Jake's got about 40 head of cattle, plus horses, chickens, and 2 stubborn old goats he refuses to get rid of. The hands are good men, Tommy, Pete, and Old River Joe. They've been with Jake for years." The main house was even more impressive up close. The wraparound porch had comfortable chairs and hanging plants, making it look more welcoming than Elena had expected. Betty led her around to the back door, which opened into a large kitchen with modern appliances and a breakfast table big enough for 8 people. "Jake usually eats breakfast about this time," Betty said, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "He's not much of a talker in the mornings, but don't let that worry you. He's just thinking about the day ahead." As if summoned by her words, heavy footsteps sounded on the back porch. The door opened and Jake ducked slightly to fit through the frame. In the morning light, Elena could see him more clearly than yesterday. His hair was dark brown with threads of gray at the temples, and his face had lines that spoke of years spent working outdoors. He was wearing jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt that stretched across his massive chest. "Morning, Betty," he said in his deep voice. Then his pale blue eyes found Elena. "How did you sleep?" "Fine, thank you," Elena replied, surprised that he asked. Jake nodded and sat down at the table. Betty immediately put a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast in front of him, along with a cup of coffee that looked tiny in his large hands. "Elena's going to help me with the books today," Betty announced. "That filing system of yours is a disaster, Jake Morrison." Jake's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Seems to work fine for me." "That's because you have everything memorized," Betty scolded. "But what happens when you want to take a vacation?" "Don't take vacations," Jake said simply, taking a bite of eggs. Elena found herself studying him as he ate. Despite his intimidating size, his table manners were perfect, and he seemed genuinely fond of Betty, who clearly felt comfortable enough to tease him. Maybe the stories about him being mean were exaggerated. "What's Elena's job going to be exactly?" Betty asked. Jake looked at Elena. "What are you good at?" The question caught Elena off guard. "I have a business degree from the community college. I helped my father with bookkeeping and organizing feed orders. I can cook basic meals and I know about cattle care." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Ranch coordinator then. Keep track of supplies, schedules, paperwork. Make sure we don't run out of feed or miss any vet appointments." Elena blinked in surprise. "That's a real job, with responsibility. You got a problem with that?" Jake asked. "No, I just thought you'd have me cleaning toilets or something." Jake's expression darkened slightly. "I'm not in the business of humiliating people, Elena. You work hard, you get treated with respect, that's how it works here." "I apologize," Elena said quickly. "I didn't mean to insult you." Jake studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Finish your breakfast. Betty will show you the office." After Jake left for the day, Betty led Elena to a room off the main hallway that served as the ranch office. Papers were scattered across the desk in what looked like complete chaos, but Betty assured her that Jake could find anything he needed in less than a minute. "He's got a mind like a steel trap," Betty explained, "but he could use some help getting organized for tax season." Elena spent the morning sorting through invoices, receipts, and veterinary records. She discovered that Jake ran a very successful operation, but his record-keeping could definitely use improvement. By lunchtime, she had created a basic filing system and started entering information into a simple spreadsheet. "You're a miracle worker." Betty laughed when she saw the organized piles. "Jake's going to think Christmas came early." Elena felt a warm glow of satisfaction. It had been months since she felt useful or capable of anything. Working with numbers and organizing information came naturally to her, and it felt good to use her skills again. That afternoon, Betty took her on a tour of the ranch facilities. The barns were clean and well-maintained with modern equipment for handling the cattle. The horses were beautiful animals that came to the fence when Betty called to them. Everything showed signs of being run by someone who cared about doing things right. "Jake built most of this himself," Betty said with obvious pride. "Started with nothing when he was just 18 years old. Now he's got one of the most successful ranches in the county." "How long have you known him?" Elena asked. Betty's expression grew thoughtful. "About 15 years now. He hired me when my husband died and I needed work. Jake was probably 25 then. Just a big, lonely kid trying to prove he could make it on his own." "Lonely?" "Jake didn't have it easy growing up," Betty said carefully. "People see his size and make assumptions. They think he's mean or dangerous when really he's just protective of himself." Elena thought about that as they walked back toward the house. Jake had certainly been intimidating yesterday, but today he seemed more reserved than threatening. And he had given her meaningful work instead of treating her like a servant. When Jake returned for dinner that evening, Elena had prepared a simple meal of pot roast, potatoes, and green beans. She wasn't sure if she was supposed to eat with him or not, so she set 2 places and waited to see what would happen. "Smells good," Jake said as he washed his hands at the kitchen sink. "I hope you like it," Elena replied nervously. Jake sat down and gestured to the other chair. "Aren't you eating?" Elena sat down across from him, acutely aware of how his presence seemed to fill the entire room. They ate in silence for several minutes before Jake spoke. "Betty says you got the office organized." "I made a start," Elena said. "Your system works for you, but having everything filed will make tax preparation easier." Jake nodded. "Good thinking." He paused, then added, "Pete says we're low on mineral supplements for the cattle. Can you call the feed store tomorrow and place an order?" Elena felt another warm glow. He was trusting her with ranch business already. "Of course, should I set up accounts with your regular suppliers?" "That would help," Jake agreed. "Betty has all the contact information." As the days passed, Elena fell into a routine at Morrison Ranch. She woke early, prepared breakfast, and spent her mornings in the office organizing paperwork and making supply orders. Afternoons were often spent helping Betty with other tasks around the house or learning about the cattle operation from the ranch hands. Tommy, Pete, and River Joe were friendly men who clearly respected Jake and seemed curious about Elena. They answered her questions about ranch life and gradually included her in their easy banter during lunch breaks. "Boss seems different lately," Pete observed one day while they were watching Jake work with a young horse in the corral. "Different how?" Elena asked. "Happier, maybe," Tommy said. "He's been whistling while he works." Elena looked at Jake, who was patiently coaxing the skittish horse to accept a halter. His movements were gentle and sure, showing no frustration when the animal shied away. There was something almost graceful about the way he worked despite his enormous size. "He's good with animals," Elena commented. "Best I've ever seen," River Joe agreed. "Jake's got a gift for understanding what they need." One evening after dinner, Elena was washing dishes when she heard piano music coming from the living room. The melody was beautiful and haunting, played with surprising skill. Curious, she dried her hands and crept toward the sound. Jake was sitting at an old upright piano, his massive fingers moving delicately across the keys. His eyes were closed, and his face was peaceful in a way Elena had never seen before. The music he played was sad but beautiful, like a prayer or a memory of something precious and lost. Elena stood in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt but unable to tear herself away. When the song ended, Jake opened his eyes and saw her standing there. "I'm sorry," Elena said quickly. "I didn't mean to spy. I just..." The music was beautiful. Jake's face flushed slightly. My mother taught me before she died. I don't play much anymore. You should, Elena said softly. You're very talented. Jake looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his pale blue eyes. Thank you, he said quietly. 3 weeks into her new life at Morrison Ranch, Elena had settled into a comfortable routine. She woke each morning looking forward to the day's work, something she hadn't expected when she first arrived. The ranch was running more smoothly than ever, thanks to her organizational skills, and even the weather had been cooperating with clear skies and mild temperatures. That all changed on a Tuesday night in late April. Elena was finishing the dishes when she noticed strange flashes of light outside the kitchen window. At first she thought it might be car headlights, but the flashes were too bright and too frequent. When thunder rumbled across the valley, she realized a storm was approaching fast. Jake appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face grim. Storm's coming in hard from the west, he said. Weather service is calling for high winds and lightning. I need to check the cattle and make sure they're in safe pasture. I'll come with you, Elena said without thinking. Jake shook his head. Too dangerous. You stay inside. Elena felt a flash of irritation. I grew up on a ranch, Jake. I know how to handle cattle in bad weather. That was your father's cattle on your father's land, Jake said firmly. These are my responsibility. Before Elena could argue further, Jake was gone, the back door slamming behind him. Through the window, she watched him stride toward the barn, where Tommy and Pete were already saddling horses. The wind was picking up, bending the trees and sending dust devils across the yard. Elena tried to settle down with a book, but she couldn't concentrate. The storm was getting worse by the minute. Lightning cracked across the sky like broken glass, and the thunder was so loud it rattled the windows. Rain began pelting the roof in heavy drops that quickly became a downpour. Around 10 o'clock, Elena heard shouting outside. She ran to the window and saw an orange glow coming from the direction of the south pasture. Her heart stopped. Fire. Without hesitation, she grabbed Jake's spare rain jacket from the mudroom and ran outside into the storm. The wind nearly knocked her down, and the rain was so heavy she could barely see 10 feet in front of her. But she could smell smoke now, acrid and dangerous on the wind. She found Jake and his men at the fence line between the main ranch and the south pasture. A lightning strike had ignited the dry grass near the creek, and despite the rain, the fire was spreading quickly in the strong wind. Jake was on horseback trying to turn the cattle away from the flames and toward the safety of the main pasture. Elena! Tommy spotted her first. Get back to the house! What can I do to help? She shouted over the wind. Nothing. Jake's voice boomed across the pasture. This is too dangerous. But Elena could see the problem immediately. There was a calf separated from the herd, trapped on the wrong side of a burning patch of grass. The little animal was bawling in terror, running back and forth along the fence line but unable to find a way to safety. Jake saw it too. He turned his horse toward the calf, but the fire had spread between them. His horse reared and refused to approach the flames no matter how hard Jake urged it forward. Elena didn't think. She just acted. While Jake was fighting with his horse, she slipped through the fence and ran toward the stranded calf. The heat from the fire was intense, and smoke burned her lungs, but she kept going. Elena, no. Jake's voice was raw with panic. The calf was small enough that Elena thought she might be able to carry it if she could catch it. The little animal was too scared to think clearly, running in circles and getting closer to the flames with each pass. Elena managed to corner it against the fence and grab it around the middle, lifting its front legs off the ground. Come on, baby, she whispered in its ear. Let's get you out of here. The calf was heavier than she expected, and it struggled against her grip. Elena half carried, half dragged it toward a gap in the fire line where the rain had dampened the flames. Smoke stung her eyes and made breathing difficult, but she could see clear ground on the other side. She was almost to safety when her foot caught in a gopher hole. Elena went down hard, losing her grip on the calf. Pain shot through her ankle, and for a terrifying moment, she couldn't get back up. The fire was closing in around her, and the calf was running in panic again. Suddenly, massive hands lifted her from the ground. Jake had somehow gotten through the fire on foot, and he was carrying both her and the calf toward safety. His face was black with soot, and his clothes were singed, but his grip was steady and sure. "Don't you ever do anything that stupid again," he said through gritted teeth as he carried her through the gap in the flames. Once they were on safe ground, Jake set Elena down carefully but kept one arm around her waist. The calf immediately ran toward the rest of the herd, apparently unharmed by its adventure. Elena tried to put weight on her injured ankle and winced. "Can you walk?" Jake asked. "I think so," Elena said, though she wasn't sure. Jake didn't take any chances. He scooped her up in his arms like she weighed nothing and carried her toward his truck. "Tommy, you and Pete keep working on the fire," he called over his shoulder. "I'll be back as soon as I get Elena looked at." "Jake, I'm fine," Elena protested, though she had to admit it felt good to be held against his solid chest. "You are not fine," Jake said firmly. "You could have been killed. Do you have any idea what that would have done to me?" The raw emotion in his voice made Elena look up at his face. In the flickering light from the fire, she could see something in his pale blue eyes that took her breath away. Fear, yes, but something else too. Something that looked almost like... Jake seemed to realize what he had revealed because his expression immediately shuddered. He put Elena in the passenger seat of his truck and drove toward the house without saying another word. In the kitchen, Jake insisted on examining Elena's ankle himself. His huge hands were surprisingly gentle as he probed for broken bones, and Elena found herself watching his face instead of worrying about the pain. "It's just a sprain," he concluded, "but you need to stay off it for a few days." "I can't stay off it," Elena protested. "There's too much work to do." "The work will wait," Jake said firmly. He fetched an ice pack from the freezer and carefully positioned it on her ankle. "Elena, what you did tonight, that was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. I couldn't just watch that calf suffer," Elena said. "I know." Jake's voice was soft now. "That's what scares me." They looked at each other in the bright kitchen light, both of them dirty and exhausted from fighting the fire. Elena became aware that Jake's hands were still resting on her ankle, his touch warm and comforting despite the ice pack. "Jake," she said quietly. "Yeah? Thank you for coming after me." Jake's throat worked as he swallowed hard. "Elena, I need you to understand something. When I saw you in that fire, when I thought I might lose you..." He stopped and shook his head. "I can't go through that again." "You won't lose me," Elena whispered. Jake looked at her for a long moment, his pale eyes searching her face. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." Before Elena could lose her nerve, she reached up and touched Jake's cheek. His skin was rough with soot and stubble, but warm under her palm. Jake went very still, like he was afraid to breathe. "Elena," he said, his voice rough. "I'm not going anywhere, Jake," she whispered. "This is my home now, too." Something cracked in Jake's carefully controlled expression. He leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't move, he brushed his lips against hers in the gentlest kiss Elena had ever experienced. When they broke apart, Jake rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not good at this," he admitted quietly. "Good at what?" "Letting people matter to me. It never ends well." Elena's heart ached for the pain she heard in his voice. "Tell me," she said softly. Jake was quiet for so long that Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in halting sentences, he began to speak about his childhood, about being too big too young, scaring other kids without meaning to, about foster homes where people were afraid of him or wanted to use his size for their own purposes, about learning that it was safer to keep people at a distance than to risk being hurt again. "I built this ranch to be my sanctuary," he finished. "A place where I could be alone and not have to worry about disappointing anyone or being disappointed." "And now?" Elena asked. Jake's thumb traced gently across her cheekbone. "Now I have you here and I don't know what to do about it. You don't have to do anything. Elena said. Just let me stay. Let me care about you. And when you realize what everyone else has realized, that I'm too much trouble, too difficult, too... Elena silenced him with another kiss, pouring all her growing feelings into the gentle contact. When they separated, she looked directly into his eyes. I see you, Jake Morrison, she said firmly. Not the giant, not the scary rancher everyone talks about. I see the man who plays piano when he thinks no one is listening. The man who built a cottage just for me because he wanted me to have privacy and dignity. The man who risked his life, tonight to save mine. Jake closed his eyes as if her words caused him physical pain. Elena, I'm not going anywhere, she repeated. So you better get used to having me around. When Jake opened his eyes again, the walls he had built around his heart were finally beginning to crumble. For the first time since Elena had known him, he looked truly vulnerable. I don't want to hurt you, he whispered. You won't, Elena said with complete certainty. Summer arrived at Morrison Ranch like a gentle blessing. The pastures were green and lush, the cattle were healthy and content, and Elena had never been happier in her life. Her ankle had healed completely from the fire incident 2 months ago, but the change in her relationship with Jake had proven to be permanent and wonderful. They had grown closer with each passing day. Jake no longer ate his meals in silence, instead sharing stories about his day or asking Elena about her plans for improving the ranch's efficiency. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Sometimes Jake would play piano while Elena worked on her laptop, organizing records or researching new approaches to sustainable ranching. The physical affection between them had developed slowly and sweetly. Jake was always careful with his strength, treating Elena like something precious that might break if he held her too tightly. His kisses were gentle and reverent, his touch always respectful. Elena had never felt so cherished or protected in her life. You're thinking pretty hard over there, Jake said one evening as they sat on the porch swing together. Elena was curled up against his side, her head resting on his broad shoulder. Just planning, Elena replied, smiling up at him. I've been researching agritourism options for the ranch. With your permission, I think we could offer horseback riding lessons and maybe even overnight stays for city people who want to experience ranch life. Jake's arm tightened around her. We? Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had been thinking of the ranch as theirs for weeks now, but they had never actually discussed the future in concrete terms. I mean, if you want my input, it's your ranch, obviously. Elena, Jake said softly, turning to face her more fully. I want you to know that you're not just paying off a debt anymore. You're part of this place now. Part of my life. Elena's heart swelled with happiness. Is that your way of saying you want me to stay? That's my way of saying I can't imagine this place without you, Jake admitted, his pale blue eyes serious. I love you, Elena. I should have said it sooner, but Elena silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her own feelings into the gentle contact. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. I have for weeks now. Jake's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something beautiful. So we're really doing this? Building a life together? If you'll have me, Elena said. Forever, Jake replied, and Elena believed him completely. The next few weeks were the happiest of Elena's life. She threw herself into planning improvements for the ranch while Jake supported every idea she had. They talked about expanding the cattle operation, maybe adding some guest cabins for the agritourism business, and even discussed the possibility of Elena taking some online courses to get certified in sustainable agriculture practices. Betty Henderson was delighted by the obvious happiness of her two favorite people. About time you two figured it out, she said one morning while helping Elena plant a new garden. I've been watching Jake moon over you for months. He has not been mooning, Elena protested, though she was smiling. Oh, honey, that man was smitten. From day one, Betty laughed. He just didn't know what to do about it. Elena was humming as she worked in the office that afternoon, updating spreadsheets and placing orders for winter feed supplies. Through the window, she could see Jake working with a young horse in the corral, his movements patient and sure. Life was perfect. That's when Carlos Martinez walked through the front door without knocking. Elena's blood turned to ice in her veins. She hadn't seen her older brother in over 2 years, not since the fight that had driven him away from their father's ranch for good. Carlos looked exactly the same, tall and lean with the same dark hair and eyes as Elena, but with a hardness around his mouth that spoke of poor choices and bitter regrets. "Hello, little sister," Carlos said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What are you doing here?" Elena asked, standing up slowly from behind the desk. "Can't a man visit his only family?" Carlos moved into the room like he owned it, examining the organized files and neat workspace Elena had created. "You've done well for yourself, though I have to say when I heard you were bought at auction like a piece of livestock I was concerned." Elena's face burned with humiliation and anger. "It's not like that. Jake gave me a job and a place to live while I work off Papa's debt. It's a fair arrangement." "Is it?" Carlos's voice was silky with false concern. "Because from what I hear, around town you and this Jake Morrison are playing house like a couple of teenagers. People are talking, Elena, saying you're his kept woman now." "That's not true," Elena said firmly, though her heart was racing. "I work here. I earn my keep." Carlos laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Come on, Elena. A man doesn't buy a woman and give her the easy job unless he expects something in return. You're not that naive." "You don't know anything about Jake," Elena shot back. "He's a good man." "He's using you," Carlos said bluntly. "And when he gets tired of playing with his bought woman, where will that leave you? He'll have nothing again, just like when Papa died." Elena felt tears stinging her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Why are you here, Carlos? What do you want?" Carlos's expression grew serious. "I want to help you, Elena. I've got a job. Lined up in California, good money, legitimate work. I can take you with me. Get you away from this place before it all falls apart." "I don't want to leave," Elena said firmly. "You don't have a choice," Carlos replied, his voice turning hard. "Papa left more than just debt when he died, Elena. He left problems, big problems that are about to catch up with both of us." Elena's stomach dropped. "What kind of problems?" Carlos glanced around the room nervously, then moved closer to Elena and lowered his voice. "Papa was involved in some business that wasn't entirely legal. Cattle that didn't always have proper paperwork, if you know what I mean. The authorities are starting to ask questions." "That's impossible," Elena whispered. "Papa was honest, he would never." "Papa was desperate," Carlos cut her off. "The ranch was failing for years before he died. He did what he had to do to keep food on the table and pay the bills. But now they're looking into his business partners, and your boyfriend's ranch is on their list of places that might have been involved." Elena felt the room spinning around her. "Jake doesn't know anything about this. He bought Papa's debt legitimately through the bank." "Did he?" Carlos asked. "Are you sure about that? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Jake Morrison found a convenient way to get his hands on a pretty woman while covering up his connection to Papa's illegal activities." "You're lying," Elena said desperately. "I wish I was," Carlos replied. "But Elena, you need to come with me now, before this all comes out, because when it does, everyone connected to Papa's operation is going down, including you and your giant boyfriend." "I need to talk to Jake," Elena said. "There's no time," Carlos said urgently. "I'm leaving tonight and you're coming with me. Pack your things." "No," Elena said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere until I talk to Jake and find out the truth." Carlos grabbed her arm roughly. "Elena, listen to me. If you stay here, you're going to prison. Is that what you want?" "Let go of me," Elena said, pulling away from his grip. That's when they heard heavy footsteps on the front porch. Jake's voice called out, "Elena, is everything all right? I saw a strange car in the driveway." Carlos's face went pale. "Don't tell him I'm here," he hissed. But it was too late. Jake appeared in the office doorway, having to duck slightly to fit through the Frame. His pale blue eyes immediately assessed the situation. Elena's distressed expression, the strange man standing too close to her, the tension in the room. "Who are you?" Jake asked in his deep, dangerous voice. "Carlos Martinez," Carlos replied, trying to look confident despite Jake's intimidating presence. "Elena's brother." Jake's expression didn't change, but Elena could see his muscles tensing under his work shirt. "Elena's never mentioned having a brother." "We're not close," Carlos said quickly. "I came to check on her, make sure she's being treated well." Jake looked at Elena, concern clear in his eyes. "Are you okay?" Elena opened her mouth to answer, but Carlos spoke first. "Actually, I was just telling Elena that it's time for her to move on. I've got work for her in California, and family should stick together." Jake's face went completely still, but Elena could see the hurt flashing in his eyes. "Is that what you want, Elena?" Elena looked between the two men, Carlos with his smooth lies and hidden threats, and Jake with his honest eyes and gentle heart. She thought about everything Carlos had told her about their father's illegal activities and Jake's possible involvement. She thought about the whispers Carlos mentioned about her being Jake's kept woman. Most of all, she thought about how much she loved Jake and how much it would destroy her if Carlos was telling the truth about him. Elena started, then stopped. She needed time to think, to sort through Carlos's claims and figure out what was real. Jake saw her hesitation and something died in his expression. "I see," he said quietly. "Jake, it's not," Elena began, but Jake was already turning away. "Your debt is paid off anyway," he said without looking at her. "You're free to go wherever you want." "Jake, wait," Elena called. But he was already walking away, his shoulders. Elena had been living in a cramped motel room in Bakersfield, California for 3 weeks, and every day felt like a year. Carlos had gotten her a job waitressing at a truck stop diner, but the work was mind-numbing and the customers were often rude. Worse than that, Elena felt like a piece of her soul had been left behind at Morrison Ranch. She couldn't stop thinking about Jake, about the hurt in his pale blue eyes when she hesitated to defend their relationship, about the way he had dismissed her so coldly, telling her that her debt was paid and she was free to go. Had Carlos been right about Jake just using her? The thought made her sick to her stomach, but she couldn't shake the doubt that had been planted in her mind. Carlos, meanwhile, seemed nervous all the time. He kept checking his phone and looking over his shoulder like he expected trouble to find them at any moment. When Elena asked him about it, he just said he was being careful and changed the subject. "I still don't understand why we had to leave so quickly," Elena said one evening as they sat in a dingy restaurant near the motel. "You never explained exactly what Papa was supposed to have done wrong." Carlos shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I told you, Elena. Cattle with questionable paperwork. The authorities were asking questions. But what does that have to do with Jake? His ranch is completely legitimate." "Is it?" Carlos asked. "How do you know? Did you ever actually look at his business records?" Elena frowned. She had organized Jake's files, placed his orders, and managed his accounts for months. Everything had seemed completely above board. "Yes, I handled most of his paperwork. There was nothing suspicious about any of it." Carlos looked away. "Maybe he kept the real business separate from what you saw." Something about his evasive answers was bothering Elena more and more. "Carlos, I want to see proof of these accusations against Papa. I want to see official documents or police reports or something concrete." "Elena, you just have to trust me," Carlos said firmly. "I'm your brother. I'm trying to protect you." But Elena was tired of taking his word for everything. That night, after Carlos had gone to sleep, she used the motel's computer to search for any news about investigations into cattle operations in their home county. She found nothing. No arrests, no investigations, no mention of their father or anything connected to his ranch. Growing more suspicious, Elena called information and got the number for the sheriff's office back home. When Deputy Williams answered, Elena identified herself and asked if there were any ongoing investigations into her father's business practices. "Elena Martinez?" Deputy Williams sounded surprised. "Honey, Your father was one of the most honest ranchers we ever dealt with. There's no investigation. Why would you think there was? Elena's blood ran cold. My brother Carlos told me. Carlos Martinez? The deputy's voice hardened. Elena, where are you right now? Are you safe? Why? What's wrong? We've been looking for Carlos for weeks now, Deputy Williams said grimly. He's wanted for questioning in connection with a cattle theft ring. We think he may have been using your father's name and reputation to legitimize stolen livestock sales. Elena felt the room spinning around her. That's not possible. I'm afraid it is, honey. And Elena, there's something else you should know. Jake Morrison came to us about a week after you left, asking if we had any information about threats made against you. He was worried that someone might have forced you to leave against your will. He was worried about me? Elena whispered. That man has been calling every few days to check if we'd heard from you. Deputy Williams said gently. Elena, I don't know what your brother told you about Jake Morrison, but that man is worried sick about you. Elena hung up the phone with trembling hands. Everything Carlos had told her was a lie. Her father hadn't been involved in any illegal activities. Jake wasn't connected to any criminal operation, and Jake hadn't dismissed her coldly because he was using her. He had been hurt and confused by her apparent willingness to leave with a stranger. She had been manipulated and lied to by her own brother, and now she was 3 states away from the man she loved, working in a dead-end job while Jake thought she had chosen to abandon him. Elena looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight, but she didn't care. She had to call Jake immediately and explain everything. She had to tell him the truth and hope that he could forgive her for doubting him. But when she reached for the phone, Carlos appeared in the doorway of their shared room. His face was dark with anger, and Elena realized he had been listening to her conversation. You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? He said coldly. Carlos, I know the truth now, Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. I know you lied to me about everything. Carlos laughed bitterly. The truth? The truth is that I owe some very dangerous people a lot of money, and I needed time to figure out how to pay them back. Taking you away from your boyfriend's ranch bought me that time. So you used me, Elena said, her heart breaking for entirely different reasons now. Family uses family, Carlos said with a shrug. That's how the world works. I'm going home, Elena said firmly. I'm going back to Jake and I'm going to tell him everything. Carlos stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. No, you're not. Elena saw something in her brother's eyes that she had never seen before, something cold and desperate that made her afraid. Carlos, get out of my way. I can't do that, Elena. If you go back now and tell people what really happened, the police will find me. And if the police find me, I'm as good as dead. Elena realized with growing horror that Carlos wasn't just a thief. He was in serious trouble with dangerous people, and he was willing to keep her prisoner to protect himself. Please, she whispered. I just want to go home. This is your home now, Carlos said. And you're going to stay here and keep your mouth shut, or things are going to get very unpleasant for both of us. Elena spent the next 2 days looking for a chance to escape, but Carlos watched her constantly. He accompanied her to work, picked her up afterward, and even slept in the chair by the door to make sure she couldn't leave during the night. Elena felt trapped and desperate, but she refused to give up hope. Somehow she had to find a way back to Jake. Her chance came on Thursday afternoon when Carlos got a phone call that clearly agitated him. Elena couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but she heard him mention meeting someone and needing to take care of business. After he hung up, he paced around the motel room for several minutes. I have to go out for a few hours, he finally said. You're staying here, and if you try to leave, I'll know about it. After Carlos left, Elena waited exactly 5 minutes before grabbing her purse and heading for the door. She had saved every penny from her waitressing job, and it was just enough to buy a bus ticket home. She would have to leave most of her clothes behind, but she didn't care. All that mattered was getting back to Jake. The bus ride seemed to take forever. But finally, Elena found herself standing outside the Morrison Ranch gate as the sun was setting. Her heart was pounding as she walked up the familiar driveway, hoping and praying that Jake would listen to her explanation. The ranch looked exactly the same, but somehow different too. The cattle were in the evening pasture, the horses were grazing peacefully, and smoke was rising from the chimney of the main house. It was like coming home after a long, terrible dream. Elena knocked on the front door, her hands shaking with nerves. When it opened, she found herself face to face with Betty Henderson, who looked like she had seen a ghost. "Elena," Betty gasped. "Oh, honey, what are you doing here?" "I need to see Jake," Elena said desperately. "I need to explain everything. I made a terrible mistake." Betty's expression was sympathetic but worried. "Elena, honey, Jake he's not doing well. When you left, it just about destroyed him." Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Please, Betty, I know I hurt him, but I can explain. My brother lied to me about everything. I never wanted to leave." "He's out in the south pasture," Betty said finally. "But Elena, be gentle with him. He's been like a wounded animal for weeks." Elena hurried toward the south pasture, where she could see a familiar tall figure working alone in the gathering dusk. Jake was mending fence, his movements mechanical and joyless. He looked thinner than when she had left, and there was something defeated about his posture that broke Elena's heart. "Jake," she called softly. He turned around, and Elena saw the shock and pain flash across his face when he recognized her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jake's expression hardened into the cold mask Elena remembered from her first day at the ranch. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice flat and emotionless. "I came to tell you the truth," Elena said, taking a step closer. "About why I left, about my brother, about everything." "Don't matter now," Jake said, turning back to his fence work. "You made your choice." "No, I didn't," Elena said firmly. "I was lied to and manipulated. Jake, please look at me." Jake's hand stilled on the fence post, but he didn't turn around. "Say what you came to say and then go." Elena took a deep breath and began to tell Jake everything. About Carlos's lies concerning their father's supposed illegal activities. About the threats and manipulation that had made her feel like she had no choice but to leave. About discovering the truth and Carlos's real reasons for taking her away.